tonight, I may be without a jacket and with sleeves rolled up. I want to first and foremost thank Jeff and Delana for inviting me here tonight. Many of you were here the night that I spoke at the Southeast Texas Tea Party when I ran for state representative back in 2011. But what many of you found out, or I think we even talked about that night, was that for many years, I had been engaged in a fight for Texas independence. So I want to start off tonight by talking to you a little bit about where I was 19 years ago at this very moment. You see, I did everything that I was supposed to do for years. I grew up in a household with a politically active family. I put out campaign signs every election cycle with my dad. Some of the earliest memories that I have are going out there with my dad, knocking on doors, handing out flyers and pamphlets, putting out those campaign signs. And cycle after cycle after cycle, I watched the disappointment in my father's face when he realized that the person that he had worked tirelessly for went to Washington, D.C. only to sell out the people that voted for him. You see, the wonderful thing about growing up with a parent that was born in 1932 is they have absolutely no qualms about having the nightly news on while you're eating dinner and complaining about what they hear about the United States Congress loudly, repeatedly. So this is the environment that I grew up in. One that taught me that if you want things to change, you have to get out there and make them change, right? Does that sound familiar to you folks? One of Newton's laws of physics. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. It's pure physics, folks. But that was the lesson. But the other lesson was that you never stop, right? You always look for some kind of solution. So I did what I was taught. At the age of 18, I ran for mayor of my hometown, a town of 5,000 people, because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And I got to tell you, coming third in a three-person race will hurt your psyche. Honestly, I don't know that I would have voted for the 18-year-old either. But I did what I was supposed to do. I knocked doors. Thanks. I knocked doors. I talked to people. I shook hands. I talked about things of substance because that's what I was supposed to do. You see, even after that, into college, I continued to fight the good fight. I continued to believe that we could be better, that we could do better. And honestly, I believe that's why you folks are sitting in this room tonight, is that you believe that we could do better. Am I right? Yep. That we can be better than we are. But as I continued on and did the things that I had to do, I even harassed my congressman. I'd like to personally think that I sent him into retirement. But every single solitary time, I found that the efforts that I made to direct change, to direct fixes to Washington, D.C. fell flat. That it was that system there that did not care for people like me. That it was Washington, D.C. that was not broken, but it was doing as it was intended, which was to grow itself and perpetuate its existence. And so I was on the verge of losing hope. Not to help matters, I was introduced to two brothers, the Fort brothers. You guys don't know them. But they challenged me. They issued me a challenge. They handed me a copy of the United States Constitution, and they handed me a copy of the Communist Manifesto. And they challenged me to go home and read both cover to cover and choose for myself what the government resembled most. Did it resemble those principles, those founding principles of Thomas Jefferson and the Founding Fathers? Or was what was coming out of the District of Criminals more like the principles of Karl Marx? And so I took the challenge. I read them cover to cover both. the first time I had read the U.S. Constitution since I'd gotten out of high school. And once I read those, I judged for myself that the people in Washington, D.C. and that system esteemed the principles of Marx over the principles of Jefferson. And it explained every reason, everything that I had observed, all the work that my father had put in, all the work that I had put in, why it was not bearing fruit. And so I found myself 19 years ago at this very moment, scared, angry, disillusioned, and on the verge of losing all hope. But then the answer, the solution, was presented to me. And it was quite simple, folks, because it was indeed right under my feet all along. It was my home. It was Texas. You see, although we were born, and I was born and raised in a flag-waving American family, the thread that was constant all the way through was that we were Texan, that we were different, that we were a cut above. We believed in these principles of freedom and independence. We were just a little bit wild, and a whole lot wilder than some people in some other states, right? We were special. We were something different. And I was introduced to this wonderful thing called the Texas Constitution. Anybody here ever heard of it? Congratulations, you're much better than many of the people sitting in the House of Representatives and the state Senate. But I was introduced to this one thing in there. Article 1, Section 1. For those of you playing the home version of this game, that is the first part in the entire document. And it's very explicit when it says these words: Texas is a free and independent state. Man, that's beautiful, right?
Capital S.
But then, it goes on to say this: the perpetuity of the Union depends on the right of local self-government unimpaired to all the states. Think about those words. The perpetuity of the Union, the continuance of its existence, depends, completely contingent upon, the right, something fundamental, of local self-government. We govern ourselves, unimpaired to all the states. And so my first question for you guys tonight, I guess technically be my third after the podium thing, right? Is this: do you believe that the right of local self-government has been impaired to Texas?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I find it difficult, as we have been out on this 21-city tour, to find anyone who can honestly and sincerely disagree with that statement. But you see, folks, Article 1, Section 1 makes it pretty clear then, right? If the right of local self-government has been impaired to Texas, then Article 1, Section 1 provides us with the uncomfortable truth that according to the Texas Constitution, the Union is at an end. It's over. You see, the uncomfortable truth, the reality of it is, and you all sense it, I know as we have gone from corner to corner in Texas for well over the last decade, that people everywhere in Texas sense it. That Texas and the rest of the Union are on divergent paths. You see, we've got a future ahead of us, and they've got crumbling and destruction in front of them. In front of us, we've got the glass and the steel and the promise and the prosperity of places like Dallas. And in their future, with their policies and their philosophies, they've got Detroit in their future. So Texans, what do we want? Do we want a little more Dallas or more Detroit? That really is ultimately the question that we have to answer for ourselves. Now, please save your Dallas jokes until after the meeting. But the fact of the matter is this: as Texans, we are presented with choices. And 19 years ago, I was presented with that choice. to know what I knew about the Texas Constitution, about the U.S. Constitution, and how the nature of the federal government and the federal system had been fundamentally transformed right under our noses and right before our eyes, to know that and do nothing, or to know that and do what I was supposed to do. You see, because Article 1, Section 1 is not where the Texas Constitution stops. It's Article 1, Section 2 that tells us what we have to do. But if I share that with you, I'll be jumping ahead. So for 19 years, from August 24th of 1996 to this very day, I have done absolutely nothing else but primarily fight for the independence of Texas. Because folks, Texas is worth it. Now in those days, it was extraordinarily difficult to talk about Texas independence in mixed company. You see, Texas independence, you know that whole secession thing people talk about? That was stuff that people joked about at barbecues. Remember crazy old Uncle Joe over a plate of brisket would talk about and joke about Texas being its own country again? Or if you talked seriously about it, it was something that you talked about over really bad cups of coffee in cafes somewhere in small towns. But those who embraced the promise that Texas independence could bring continued to talk about it seriously. And through obstacle after obstacle, although they called us every name in the book, they ignored us, we persevered. And when the support for this idea continued to grow, suddenly we became a threat. Right? Long before the Tea Party were called extremists, I proudly wore that label. Long before people that were protesting about the Constitution were called traitors to America, I wore that moniker. I was called a terrorist. I was called everything you can imagine. And if you don't believe me, just go look at the comments on the Facebook event for tonight, where to this day, people still call us names. But those labels that people use for us, I recall. Those were the same labels that the Loyalists called the colonists in 1776. Those are the same labels and ad hominem attacks used by Santa Anna and the Centralists against the Texians who fought for their independence and liberty. So if the words that come out of my mouth and the ideas that I promote, such as letting the people of Texas decide their future, if that causes terror in the hearts of the opposition, then they can call me a terrorist. If they are talking about me engaging in treason against a government that resembles more of what came out of Moscow in the 1980s than what came out of the pen of Thomas Jefferson in the 1776 Declaration of Independence, then call me a traitor. Because folks, they're going to oppose us at every turn. You all know this. This fight for us and for me has been very real. And in the days when Texans did not support this in the numbers that they do now, the fight was very hard. The costs that were paid were enormous. The price was high, but the payoff is worth it. You see, as we continue to persevere on this road toward Texas independence and the support built, the one thing that we saw was that support continued to grow. So I'm going to share some numbers with you tonight so you understand that if you are in the same boat that I was in, that you are not alone. In 2009, Research 2000 conducted a poll on behalf of a left-leaning media organization in which they polled Texans and they asked them a question. Do you believe that Texas would be better off as an independent nation? Much to their surprise and much to the chagrin of the opposition, the numbers were this: 50% of Republicans, 45% of independents, and 15% of Democrats believed that Texas would be better off as an independent nation. But imagine this: 2014, the Scottish National Party leads this referendum on Scottish independence. So Reuters, the respected news agency, and I say that with tongue firmly planted in cheek, conducts a poll. Well, we wonder how Americans feel about this now. Let's poll them state by state and see what they say. And we all woke up the morning after the Scottish referendum, after the dust had settled, and we saw this headline that said 25% of Americans want their state to leave the Union. But you see, in the T&M and the Texas Nationalist Movement, we look at that and say, that headline makes no sense. That's not how this is done. We want to know what the people of Texas think, right? So we go grab the poll and all of the polling data, and we look at the question. Unlike that softball Research 2000 question, it asked this: do you think that your state should leave the Union and become independent? Should. Not, oh, it might be better off, but should. A statement of political will and direction. And we found out why they used the headline that they did. You see, because from that time in 2009 to the tail end of 2014, something had changed. And the results were this: 54% of Republicans said yes. 50% of independents said yes. And 35% of Democrats said yes, that Texas should leave the Union and become an independent nation. So these numbers, folks, tell us, for those of you out there that are harboring this belief that Texas can do better, the numbers bear out that you are not alone. As president of this organization that I have been involved with for so many years, I have seen the support grow. We have worked tirelessly 24/7. While I am speaking with you here now, there are volunteers and leaders out in the field right now, engaging fellow Texans, not to convince them that independence is the way to go, but through our action to convince them to do what they already know is right. You see, as promised, I'll get back to Article 1, Section 2. The only thing standing between Texas and independence right now is Texans. You see, with support numbers that high, the only thing standing between us and independence is us. The only thing standing between Texas and all of those policies that are being shoved down our throats from the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. is us. And while so many people are still focused on fixing Washington, D.C. and believing that there is hope left, they fail to realize that if Texans want to preserve those principles for which we hold dearest, that the power is in our hands. Article 1, Section 2 says this, and it starts off with these words. It says that all political power is inherent in the people. Notice it says all political power is inherent in the people. Not the politicians, not the paperwork, not the policies, not the pundits, not the pollsters, but the people. And the beautiful thing about it is, for me, I'm a people. And you're a people. Wouldn't you like to be a people too? I'm going to have to pay royalties on that.
Gotcha, Pepper.
But it is indeed the fact, folks, that the power rests in our hands to direct the course of the future of Texas. You see, because Article 1, Section 2 goes on to say these words, that the people have at all times the inalienable right to reform, alter, or abolish their government in such manner as they may think expedient. You have the power. You have to reach out and use it. So, as an organization, as my personal mission and personal crusade toward Texas independence, all I'm doing is convincing Texans to do what they know is right. The same decisions that were made in those days with Sam Houston and William Travis, David Crockett, Stephen F. Austin, Mirabeau Lamar, And so many of those people here in Texas that had to wrestle with that hard decision. Do we continue to try to save Texas as a state of the Mexican United States? Or do we declare our independence no matter the cost, no matter the risk, so that we can preserve those principles which we hold most dear? And that, folks, is the choice before you tonight. It is the thing that I have said for so many years. When I stand in rooms just like this, looking in the face of Texans, going back many generations, or people that just came here, the choice is quite simple for us. Much like William Travis drew his line in the sand and called the men of the Alamo to make a decision to stay and fight or to escape over the walls, the choice is being offered to you tonight. The choice is this: continue to adhere to a government that cares not for you, that cares not for your principles, that exists only to ensure that your principles are continually eroded and that power is centralized in the hands of bureaucrats, to continue to swallow the fact that you will be governed by bureaucrats that you did not elect, forcing policies down your throat that you don't want, or pick up the banner and march forward to Texas independence. Now, there will be people out there, and I'll close with this, there will be people out there that will throw up every objection in the world. They will tell you that it can't be done. I know this one thing for a fact, that if you want something done, you tell a Texan that it can't be done. Wouldn't you agree? They will tell you all types of fear. They will be fear mongers. They will try to place doubt in your mind as to whether Texas, with the 12th largest GDP in the world, can survive as an independent nation. They will tell you that it's unconstitutional, but those same people have never read the Constitution, especially the 10th Amendment, which says if the Constitution is silent on it, then it's reserved to us. So they're going to try to do that. But I want you to understand something. Texas is not alone in this fight. Through the T&M, we have worked with independence movements around the world to seek information, to learn from them, but more often than not, they come to us to be inspired by the free and independent spirit that we have, to understand that we are and can be a beacon of hope in this world. So just like the Scots had their opportunity in September of last year, we are calling for an opportunity for Texans to do the same thing. Much like all of those countries that sprung up at the end of World War II, because people don't realize at the end of World War II there were 54 recognized countries around the world, and at the end of the 20th century there were 192. Anyone who says that we can't doesn't know the way the world works. Self-determination, my friends, what we have got in Scots in Article 1, Section 2 in such beautiful language is breaking out all over the world. For the first time for me in nearly 20 years, I am seeing the people of Texas catch that spirit. I am seeing them begin to embrace the words, these final words that I'll leave you with, the words of Sam Houston. When after Texas became a state, he said this: Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. Think about that for a moment. This is the same Sam Houston who led the troops to victory at San Jacinto, the same Sam Houston that rejected secession in 1861. But that same Sam Houston said those words, that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. You see, I believe Sam Houston was thinking that today was that day. That there would be a time when the future of Texas could no longer be contained by the Union. That there would be a fork in the road, a decision point. That if we chose to stay with the Union, everything that Texas is and could be would die. Or an opportunity for us to become the greatness that everyone who carved this empire out of the wilderness envisioned it to be. So the choice before you tonight, folks, before we go into Mr. Sadi's Q&A that he mentioned, is this. If Sam Houston's words were for our day, and I do believe that they are, if that time is now, that Texas should lift its head and stand among the nations, the only question and decision before you tonight is this. Will you stand with her? I want to thank you for your indulgence tonight, and I'd be more than happy to take any questions.